Chapter Bet. Everything is a bet, and in software development, we're playing at least 6 different games. The decision to fund a project was a bet. This might not be something that many people associated with the project want to admit, but it's true. What is a bet? It's a decision to take a risk with the understanding that there is the potential for a reward, but at the same time, there's also a chance of failure. That's what a project is. So one way of looking at a project is as a game of chance. This also turns out to be a useful way of explaining what would otherwise be bewildering behaviour. But also it is a comfort for those times when the project comes up the equivalent of snake eyes. I don't know much about the game of craps, but I think that's bad. Not all projects succeed. Why? Because you're a bad person? Because the team are useless? Because they didn't put in enough late nights? Or because the odds of this project succeeding were ridiculously long to start with? Game number 1. Sooner or later, someone has to say fuck it, or the Thai travel agency principle. The political scientist and economist Herb Simon coined the term bounded rationality. Perhaps we would like to be rational. Perhaps the people who decide to fund a project would like to be rational. Perhaps they would like to give full consideration to all relevant information before they make a decision. Unfortunately, the world is big. All relevant information is a lot of information. That's if anyone can agree on some test of what's relevant. So at some point, whoever is making the decision to fund or not to fund a project has to draw a bound around things that are relevant and not relevant. No matter how careful and considerate they want to be, sooner or later they need to shrug their shoulders and say, fuck it. And once someone has said fuck it, not only is the project started, but because no matter how careful the decision has been taken, there is going to be an aspect of risk and recklessness to it. 3 other games also start. Often as a project manager, you're not there when the fateful decision gets made. Often you piece together the reasons it was made after the fact. A popular reason for a project is that it replaces an existing system that has become unmaintainable. And so the assumption is that a new system will be better. Will it? This is especially a brave bet if it's pretty much the same organisation creating the new system that created the old one. Did this project get started because there was some budget that needed using up? So then there's an obvious question. What happens when the money runs out? Did this project get started because another organisation has one of these, whatever it is? Another obvious question. Is this really a good enough reason to start a project? Did this project get started because it isn't the core business of the organisation? They understand their core business well enough to realise that they won't be able to make any money running up against their competitors. So instead they decide to dip their toe into the water of another business. Again, that begs an obvious question. Game 2. HIWTYL or Macavity. This game is discussed by Venkatesh Rao in his book The Gervais Principle, and the acronym stands for Heads I Win, Tails You Lose. Rao's point is that one of the things that will make it more likely that someone says fuck it is that they think they will be able to take credit for the bet of the project if it's a success, and will be able to be nowhere to be seen if the project is a failure. To quote T.S. Eliot discussing the Napoleon of crime, Macavity the cat, "You may seek him in the basement, you may look up in the air, but I tell you once and once again, Macavity is not there." This may seem like reprehensible behaviour until we realise that if it weren't for people who are willing to say fuck it on the basis that they can be around to take credit when projects go well and do a Macavity when they don't, there probably wouldn't be any projects. Also, this seems less condemnable when we realise that the people who kick off the project aren't the only people playing a game. It might seem bad to have a senior stakeholder or project owner who's absent when things are going wrong and the project is struggling, but if the people who kicked off a project are too close, they can be tempted to tinker. Game number 3, The Hiding Hand. The journalist Malcolm Gladwell talks about the work of Albert Hirschman, who among many other jobs in a long career was involved in the management and monitoring of projects funded by the World Bank in South America. Hirschman noticed that no matter how wrong-headed and likely to fail the projects were, there was support, enthusiasm and encouragement from the people involved. He called this phenomenon the hiding hand, in reference to the established economic concept, the guiding hand, which supposedly allows markets to find a price. What he's really pointing out is something pretty obvious. People who are working on a project will tend to cover up the project's problems and downplay its risks. Certainly until the project is up and running, because they want the work. A banking project that I worked on was impossible because it was missing a key transaction database. The entire system as envisaged couldn't work without it. Nobody on the project mentioned it. By the time this problem had become well known, it had sunk the project. Game number 4. Project Management Theatre. People who kick off projects want lots of projects to be happening. This gives them the best chance of having some projects pay off. The people working on the projects want the work. It's in the interests of neither group to make it brutally clear what a risky, expensive and reckless endeavour they're involved in. So another game gets played, a game that pretends that any particular project management method, if executed carefully and precisely, will guarantee success. Careful attention can be given to the methodology to make sure it's perfectly executed. The project can be surrounded by coaches, roadmaps and project plans can show the project is eminently deliverable. Of course, everybody associated with the project has to have the necessary qualifications, with a qualification in just exactly the right version of the methodology used. Not all of this circus is useless. It may well give the project a better chance of success, but is that what it's really for? Or is it really to cover up the bare fact that a project is a bet? To really give a project its best chance of success, we have to acknowledge its riskiness and play 2 more games. I was asked as a coach to coach the Scrum Master on a project who was performing poorly, in inverted commas. Especially the way that he was running stand-ups was thought to be poor. After a few observations, a few discussions and an estimation session, we discovered the real issue with the project. It was supposed to deliver 7 times as much work as could possibly be delivered for the deadline. Of course, we've talked about something very similar to the hiding hand and project management theatre before, agreed activity. Game number 5, upping the stakes. Do you want to do this or not? To win a hand in poker, the player doesn't just make one decision. They have to make many decisions. They don't just make one bet that their hand will be the winner. They have to decide multiple times if they want to up the stake. What kinds of things might we find that make us think we need to up the stakes? Does the service need a dedicated moderation team? Does it need servers that can deal with 1 million transactions a second? Do we need to hire a consultant with extremely specialist knowledge? In most cases in poker, it's clear when the player needs to up the stakes, and each decision to up the stakes is a more informed decision. The player has typically seen more of his hand, but also in poker it's clear that refusing to up the stakes will be the end of the game. Unfortunately, because of the games that we've already talked about, none of these things are very clear in many software development projects. Heads I win, tails you lose may well mean that whoever kicked the project off is far away from it when it's in trouble. The hiding hand and project management theatre conspire to cover up that this project is any kind of bet at all. This makes it much harder for this stark choice, increase the bet or give up, to be made clear. The irony is that these bets which up the stakes are actually much better bets. They are already informed by how the project has gone up to that point. Their odds are shorter. They have a much better chance of success. But if we are project managers, this is a game that we have to play. We need to use the true value of project management methods, transparency, inspection, adaptation, to highlight potential risks and rewards and make clear the points where the stakes need to be upped and when this will be a good bet. Game number 6, shortening the odds. If the project that you're working on is a big dumb bet, a real roll of the dice, what can you do to give that bet the best chance of success? You can make smaller, lower stakes bets. Delivering working software early, regularly and often is a lower stakes bet. Sorry, my phone's making noises. If it pays off, it drastically shortens the odds of the project being a failure, or the project turning out to be technically unfeasible, or delivering something that nobody wants. User research before the bet was made and then all the way through the project, in combination with regular releases of working software, again works to shorten the odds. It reduces the chances of delivering someone that no one wants, and also provides the best, earliest information on when, if, and how the stakes need to be upped. User research combined with early working software drastically reduce the risks and shorten the odds of success for a complex form-filling project that I worked on, based on findings from user research. Conclusion. Here are the key takeaways. Bet. All projects are risks for reward. They are bets. Games. Many people on a project will try to play various games to cover up the bet-like nature of projects. Admit. If we admit that projects are bets, we can use agile strategies to help them succeed. We can use working software and user research to shorten the odds of success. Stakes. Only by admitting that the project is a bet and using agile methods to inspect and adapt can we up the stakes at the right time and with good information. Everything is a bet. Fuck it, heads I win, tails you lose, the hiding hand, project management theatre. How is this a useful way of looking at projects? Well, we've already talked about at least 2 reasons here. If you're a project manager and you understand that projects are bets, you can use user research and the early delivery of working software as a strategy for shortening the odds and increasing the chances of the project succeeding. If you understand that projects are bets, you can spot the crucial points at which the stakes need to be increased, and you can make these clear as risks and opportunities to stakeholders. But there are other reasons why it's useful and helpful to see projects as bets. The game of heads I win, tails you lose can look utterly despicable if you don't know that it's, in part at least, a rational required response to saying fuck it, and that if people couldn't behave like this, they wouldn't be tempted to say fuck it and greenlight projects. At the same time, regardless of heads I win, tails you lose, what if a senior stakeholder knows that he was the one who made the bet, and everyone else knows it too? What if there's a risk that if it doesn't pay off, he will be taking the blame? If you thought you might be taking the rap for losing between 1 million and 300 million pounds, that's the most expensive doomed project I've worked on, how would you be behaving? You might be pretty strident in your demands that a project be delivered for the deadline. Deadlines. That's one final reason why we've taken the time to look at projects as bets and to examine the games that people play as a result of making those bets. And that's because looking at projects as bets is crucial preparation for our next chapter. Because in the next chapter, the first chapter which talks about unhelpful ways of seeing projects, we're going to talk about commitment and consistency. Seeing project management as keeping promises, why that's such a bad idea, why it causes so much damage, misery and destruction, and what we can do to deal with it. But surely there are good bets and bad bets. Not every project is the victim of someone saying fuck it. In quite the same way, there are favourites and there are long shots. Yes, it's true. And this might be a point where we can push the metaphor of betting horses a bit further. Why do horses in horse races have particular odds associated with them? Because they have form. How have similar projects done in this organisation? Do projects in this organisation typically get delivered on time? Do projects in this organisation typically never get delivered? Do projects in this organisation typically take 5 to 7 years and deliver a third of what's promised? The nonsense accumulator. I realise as I write this that most of my knowledge of gambling comes from popular television. I have never been a gambling man, but I do know that an accumulator is a form of bet on multiple horses, which will pay off big if all the horses but is of course extremely long odds. That sentence is wrong. An accumulator is something where you bet on a different bunch of horses and it pays off big if all the horses come in. Why are the odds so long? Because the odds are multiplicative. If I bet on a horse, let's call him Lucky Boy, which has a 5 to 1 chance of winning, something like 20% of the time, supposedly, it will win. But if I bet on Lucky Boy, Fortunate Phil, on Lucky Boy at 5 to 1, Fortunate Phil at 3 to 1, and Jammy Jerry at 4 to 1, which make each independent bet, makes each bet independent, which makes each bet dependent on the others, the chances of all three romping home are 60 to 1, which makes just slightly more than a 1.6% chance of success. And this horrifying law of crazy bets depending on each other and accumulating also applies to projects. Okay, there are generally two bets that are going on in any project. There's the bet that there is something interesting in this area that the project deals with and that this is valuable. And there's the bet that something can be done to get at this value in a particular amount of time with a particular amount of cash. This is already a long shot. So often, for reasons I must admit I particularly don't understand, the people who kick the project off, the people who say fuck it, hook these two tricky bets up with a third or fourth bet in the accumulator. Here are some of the other bets they make. And I bet you can do this without being allowed to talk either to the people who know how the system should work or the people who are going to use it. And I bet you can do this without access to the internet or offices or servers or computers or some other piece of infrastructure that's essential to any modern project. And I bet you can do this without being shut down by the regulatory authorities, even though this is a heavily regulated area.